Everybody, welcome back to the Mouthy Money podcast. We're in a slightly different location today. Well, actually, Chris is not in a different location. I am not doing this remotely for the first time, so we're in person with each other. We've set up our little camera setup slightly differently. We're hoping it's not going to come across too bizarre, but we're in person. It's fun. We're going to play off each other's cues a little bit more and see what happens. Obviously, I'm joined by Chris Tuite, Head of Consumer Finance at Financial Communications Agency, MRM. As ever, today we've got, three topics to discuss. Three quite different topics, I think. It's fair to say, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Covering a lot of ground here.
So we'll dive straight in. And the first one we're going to talk about is a bit of a law change coming through around tipping. So Chris, take us through that. What's going on?
So yesterday, a new law came into force. I haven't been able to find the name of the law, which is a bit strange. But anyway, there we go. And it's basically saying that workers must be able to keep all the customer tips that they get. So whether it's by cash or by card. So apparently there are more than 3 million service workers in England, Scotland and Wales who would benefit from this law, which came into force yesterday, Tuesday. And if companies break the law and retain the tips, staff will be able to bring claims to an employment tribunal. And it applies across several industries, you'd expect. But the ones that are most likely to benefit are from the service industry, so restaurants, cafes, bars, pubs, hairdressers, taxi drivers. So this kind of got me thinking about tipping generally, and how it's a bit of a minefield. Starting off with the tipping law changing, I think that's fair enough. I've had situations before where I've been in establishments where it's the server has made it clear that their boss is keeping the tip.
I've never experienced that before.
So I think that's just really poor.
I mean, that is obviously poor.
It's out of order.
But I think, I mean, and I know before we had a discussion, we discussed the sense that we might have some controversial opinions on this. But I mean, tipping is one of those really funny things because Brits get a bad name for tipping, right, in the US because tipping culture is huge there. My view on it, and I mean, I didn't think you were going to agree with me, but apparently you do, is that I don't like tipping because I think people should just be paid a proper wage in the first place, which I know is probably not that controversial, I guess. And I do tip, just for anybody out there who's thinking about spitting in my soup the next time I go to a restaurant.
Careful.
But I think there's a number of things that are great around tipping, right? So you've got obviously that sense that you may be, the person you're tipping is not going to actually see the tip that you're giving them. So obviously that's why the law change is probably good. Is that going to increase food prices and this, like meal prices as a result? Because bosses are like, well, I'm not getting that extra bit off the tip. So, we have to shove the price of the meals up to get that bit of extra. Again, we always come back to it, that unintended consequences thing.
More inflation off the back of paying people.
More inflation because
more money,
of regulation.
Wage inflation and things like that. Maybe. I think if I get good service, I like the option of having to tip. I think people should be paid a fair wage. That's not a controversial opinion either. I think what's more controversial is when you decide not to tip when a tip is expected.
Yeah.
I've had a few examples of that in the past. So service charge is an interesting one for me.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to pay the service charge.
Yeah.
The service would have to be pretty awful for me not to. And it would have to be pretty hefty.
Have you ever done it?
I have, yeah.
I've done it as well.
Have you? Well, there we go then. I'm in good company.
We're terrible.
Let me defend myself before the listeners start to cast aspersions on me. But one New Year's Eve, I went into a restaurant, which shall remain nameless in London. It was a pub restaurant. And the service was so bad. They didn't bring enough cutlery out for us to eat. The food was getting cold. People were ignoring us. There was about 20 of us around the table. And then at the end of the meal, they were like, can you please get up before we'd finished, go outside and pay your entrance fee to come back in. And this included children and this included elder relatives.
Yeah.
And then the bill came and it was like, the service charge is a couple of £100. I'm sorry, no. Yeah. I'm not paying that. It's been awful from start to finish. You fleeced us. The food wasn't even that good. And we didn't have enough utensils. We had to share bloody cutlery. So, it's like, I'm not willing to do. That was an extreme example, but I think it was justified.
And this is where you start getting into those kind of like unethical money saving tips territory, which, everybody has their own little deep dark list of unethical things that they might do. And that,
I need to hear about yours. Maybe that's another thing.
It's coming soon on Mouthy Money. I'm not joking. But yeah, I mean, I would avoid doing it generally. My other thing is obviously restaurants, right? You tip, but and this is where it differs with somewhere like the US is, do you tip someone for pulling a pint for you in a pub?
Yeah, I don't think so. But is that cultural? That is definitely cultural.
That is cultural. But then other places, I was thinking, this got me thinking, like, who do I tip? And this made me think of The American Office, and one of my favorite quotes in The American Office from Dwight. And sorry, this is like a deep cut for people who are fans of The American Office. But Dwight says, "Why would I tip my server when he's doing a job that I can do? Now, my urologist, there's a man who I give a tip to."
A man who doesn't need one.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, but okay, sorry.
But to your original point, though, that's been included within his remuneration for the skill of the job, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah. So it's not. I mean, that's obviously a joke.
No, of course.
The one I think where I do tip, and maybe I tip so that I don't get bad service the next time, is like a barber.
Barber. Sadly, not a problem for me anymore, Ed. But
well, I mean, I've had some bad haircuts, so maybe I need to increase my tips. But yeah, so barber, would you tip a taxi?
I do tip London black cab drivers. I have it built into me that I round it up to the nearest pound, and I do on Uber as well. Occasionally, if I've had a particularly good experience, I will do the thing where you add a bit more. And then, funnily enough, when my daughter was on the way, we had a very lovely taxi driver. My daughter, who was recently born, Tuite. And he was very sort of obliging and helpful. So as we were going into the maternity ward, I did give him quite a big tip. So I thought, nice. So it's things like that where you're like, okay, someone's made a real effort. Yeah. But it's the expectation. I had an experience in New York. Again, this is cultural where this is all over the place here. But anyway, tips have taken us around the world. I remember I stayed in New York for about 6 weeks overseeing a friend, and I lived over in Brooklyn, and no taxi drivers wanted to take me off Manhattan for one reason or another. I don't really know why. Wasn't that au fait with what the sort of cultural norms were there. But anyway, I went over, and I think that the fare was like $11, and I gave him $15. And he said that he deemed that not to be enough, so we ended up getting into something of a disagreement.
Not to be enough?
Yeah, it was quite late at nights, all the cash I had on me. I was like, you've literally gone over the Brooklyn Bridge, like that's it, kind of thing. So we had a conversation, and then what's the recourse if you don't... If you've just been culturally insensitive in that regard, in that, it's like, well, you should be paying more. Well, I don't have any more, and this is all I've got. And frankly, I don't think you should be getting more for this journey.
Maybe he's been funny with you because you're a Brit.
Tourist, maybe. Tourist. Yeah, it could be. I found it quite interesting because I was like, I've walked into something here and I don't really know how. Yeah. And then I was really conscious of it for the rest of the time I was there.
You do get the sense sometimes that Americans have an assumption about, particularly like British tourists tipping poorly. That you do, I think it comes across sometimes.
One thing I would like to know is how much I tip per year, because that might. So if you've got a fixed amount of, say, I tip £700 a year, that might focus the mind on: is that enough? Should I tip more? Who's deserving of the tip? Maybe you can't be that. I know we're all organising our finances. Maybe that's taking it to the nth degree. I don't know, but maybe I can't predetermine who I'm going to tip, but. I think having an idea in my head of like, this is how much I spend on it per year, might think, well, who deserves that? Rather than finding myself feeling slightly socially awkward and throwing money at someone who perhaps doesn't deserve it. Like that taxi driver.
And there is also that thing about cash as well, right? Because it's like, I don't know, for me, tipping almost feels like you got to give them cash. Because if you give them cash, then you know that they're getting it, maybe. I don't know.
That was the thing at the restaurant I had, actually. The other one I mentioned where there was... They sort of said, do you get the tip? Like if I said, I'll add it onto the card. And they said, no. So I said, okay, paid the bare minimum and gave them cash. So I
did also read something. I'll try and put it in the show notes if I can find it. That now you can do tips on card and stuff like that. There's the behavioural mechanism in that makes people more likely to tip as well, because obviously people might not have cash on them to hand over. It is more of an effort to physically hand somebody some cash as well, and people are more willing to just sign a bit of cash, a bit of money over by doing the on the card reader type thing.
I can see that there's less friction. Yeah, you need that kind of friction in. I've heard that said in other places with people who have the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute, which I think was set up by Martin Lewis, which is a fantastic organisation. I remember speaking to them a few years back, and they mentioned about sort of online spending and how it's a bit like skating on ice for certain people, where there isn't just enough resistance, and once you start in a particular direction of travel, it's hard to stop. And providers should even offer the sort of stopper at the front of a not roller skate, be an ice skate, but I don't ice skate, as you can probably imagine. But being able to put that down on the ice would be enough to kind of help. And I suppose that's the same situation here with this, where it's just like, well, it's just numbers on the screen rather than coming out of the blanket. And that's a modern day consequence of the way that we organize our money now. But yeah, it's interesting. Tipping. I mean, I think it's great that it's going to the people it should be going to, the people providing the services. But I also think about, there was an example in the article that I read in the BBC there about the person in the back who of this fish and chip shop. So equally providing good service, but doesn't get tipped. And he seemed quite sort of philosophical about it. Was happy for the front of house staff who were taking the sort of the position of being hands-on with the customers deserve it. But I don't know. I think I also like the idea of when they take the tips, split them out between the people who are on the shift and then split them out equally. I think I've worked in pubs, for example, where people did that, and that always felt fair to me.
Unionised tipping.
Unionised tipping. There you go. Yeah. My centre-left politics comes to the fore again.
There's an app in that. You have like, or you do like splitwise or something with the tip.
Maybe could be the way forward if we could do it. Yeah,
that's interesting. Interesting idea.
Right. So if anyone's listening, we're in favour of tipping. Anyone listening at restaurants or bars and cab drivers, keep serving our food and letting us get in and out of taxis and making sure we get served at the bar. But make sure that your service is good. I think that's fair enough. Or, as you said, Ed, let's get rid of it altogether and just pay people more and pay more for at the till.
Probably the most left-wing thing I've ever said on the podcast. Right, let's move on from that bombshell.
Yeah.
So the next story we had this week was actually something that's still ongoing and is quite controversial, and it relates to a cruise liner. So there is a cruise liner, as we speak on the podcast, stuck in Belfast in the mouth of the harbour or river. I'm not quite sure of the geography of it.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But there's been a bit of a controversy around that, and it's been in various newspapers and in the news generally. The cruise is called the Odyssey, and they have been scheduled to depart for, I think,
months.
4 months.
Yeah,
is the delay, and they're basically stuck in port, and they've got all these guests on there, and they've all started complaining. And this is a story in the Telegraph. It's not actually a personal finance story, but we'll come to the personal finance of it. An American woman who got chucked off the cruise for complaining about the fact that they've been delayed.
Which I think is fair enough. Yeah. If they've given you a departure date.
Yeah. And there's obviously a lot of controversy here, and I'm sure the company that runs the cruise liner has its own views of what's going on. We're not here to get into that.
No.
What I found really interesting is that this lady, and this is the personal finance aspect, sold her home in the US, everything, and basically bought a ticket on this 3.5-year cruise around the world, 147 countries.
That's mad.
425 ports for £75,000.
Is that good value? It feels like good value to me, sat here. I don't know.
Well, okay, so if you think of it like that's your home now, she's paying effectively what, £25,000 a year? Actually, probably a bit less if it's 3.5 year cruise. It's like paying rent, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the rent is a room on a cruise ship, and you get to see the world.
And bed and board included, and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, so it's probably not that bad value, right?
Sounds good to me.
I don't know. It's quite a drastic thing to do, though, isn't it? It's like sell everything, go on I suppose that is something that retirees do, don't they? Go on a cruise.
It's 3.5 years of spending that amount of your pension. If you have a hefty enough pension, it might be considered to be a good way to combine the two. I like the idea, the concept, although they called it the perpetual cruise, which did just remind me of, it's called the Odyssey, right? Yeah. But it was referred to as perpetual cruise, which made me think of the river Styx. So
is that deliberate, calling it the Odyssey, like the classical reference?
I think it must be. It can't be by accident, can it?
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, it just reminded. I don't know if you've seen Chaos, that thing on Netflix recently, where the modern takes on Greek myths, when they've got this long, the river Styx, for anyone who doesn't know, is how you pass into the underworld in Greek mythology, and I'm just like, that sounded a bit sinister to me, the perpetual cruise. But aside from that, I think 3.5 years for that sort of money, bed and board included, see loads of. The only thing is, obviously, you're on a floating ship in the middle of the ocean. So what?
I know. I think you have to be of a specific disposition to go for it, right? Like you have to be really committed to the idea of doing a 3.5 year cruise, and it's kind of like, do you get your money back if you don't want to do it anymore? Possibly not.
No, stuck on this perpetual
buyer's
cruise.
regret and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the ship of the damned.
Plus, I suppose it's anywhere you rent, but like, what if your cabin neighbour is a nightmare? You could ask to move, I suppose. I don't know how hard. We need to speak to someone about this. I have to say, I did see some of the interviews of the people who were going on it, and they were absolutely thrilled. They were over the moon about it. So,
but the wider point here, right, is about like choices you make when you retire and things that you go and do. Because obviously, people have a lot of different priorities when they retire. Some people just spend their time gardening, and and I remember when they first did pension freedoms and that kind of thing, there was all this talk about, people are going to use their tax-free lump sum to go and buy a Lamborghini and that kind of thing. And I don't think that ever really materialized.
No.
This, to me, seems like the closest thing to, the proverbial buying a Lamborghini, dropping 75 grand on a cruise. Because that's a lot of money. But I guess, like you say, if somebody's got £500,000 pension pot, and they've planned the rest of it out for the next 30 years of, this is how this pension pot's going to pay for my retirement, this is my one fun thing, then I guess that's kind of fine.
I wonder how many people, this is the thing, they have that sort of level of pension available to them, and that's the problem. I think there's a lot of people going to be stuck between that kind of, those who do have pensions, those who have auto-enrolled, between that kind of 50 and 250,000 mark, which I suppose you could, again, depending on, it's all calculated on how long you live in terms of annuities and things like that as well, without getting into too much technical detail. I know you know that, and some of our listeners do as well, I'm sure. But yeah, I think you want to make sure you're maximizing everything about it, which brings me on to another interesting thing, I think, which around, do you know where all your pensions are, Ed?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I've actually recently been fiddling with them as well.
Have you? Okay, what have you been doing?
Buying and selling funds.
Okay.
I'm going to have to put a disclaimer on the podcast now.
Okay.
Actually, I have been putting more of my eggs in one basket because Isn't
that a famously bad thing to do?
Oh, God.
I'm sure someone said something about eggs and baskets in the past.
So what I did, and please, this is not financial advice. This is what I've personally done to my own pension, and I do not recommend anybody do it. Go and do your own research and make your own decisions.
Yes. Wholeheartedly agree.
That being said, what I did was, so I've got two pensions. I've got my workplace pension, which obviously I pay into on a regular basis, and the employer pays in, etc. And then I've got my consolidated pot, which is with AJ Bell, because that was kind of old pension pots, which I kind of clubbed together in one place because I didn't want to have 3 different pensions or whatever it was with a small amount in. So now I've got 2 pensions, one with my main contributions, one with like a little bit of leftover contribution in a SIP. So obviously the SIP you have to invest in yourself. And I bought 3 different funds with that when I first set that up. 2 of them, one of them has not done well. And that was a UK-based one, which I'm hoping will turn around. Fingers crossed, you never know.
I keep hearing the UK market is underpriced. But
bouncing back.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. Yeah.
Then the other one was a Asia-focused ETF tracker type thing.
Right.
Which did okay. And then a world ETF, just everything ETF, which has done unbelievably well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really, really well. It's done like, I can't remember how much. It's done a lot over 5 years, basically.
Is that the basket you put everything in?
So I put everything in that basket.
A well-sized basket, to be fair, is pretty big to put all your eggs in.
And I looked at and I then have done the same thing with my main workplace pot. And my reasoning is that I am still young enough that I'm not planning on retiring for a good 30 years. So I've got a long time to go. The world ETFs are ridiculously cheap for charges. The charge is like 0.08% or something on the ETF. Right? Yeah, absolutely minimal. When you look at what's inside it is really diversified. I mean, the biggest holding is the US, but that's because the US stock market is the biggest stock market.
Largest economy still, is it? I don't know.
All of that, yeah. So that, if I have a bias in my portfolio now, it's probably to the US. But then there's all other bits of the world, basically, and then, I think a world ETF is so easy, just, set and forget. I'm now not going to touch that. I'm sure people have different opinions about it, but it's just simpler doing that way. And it's all just kind of passively managed and that kind of thing.
I think I did something similar, not in terms of the fund, but in terms of the consolidation into one. A few years back, I'd said with the pensions knocking around, I was getting absolutely ripped off on one of the charges. And so I did it with Hargreaves as opposed to AJ Bell. But, that's working out well for me, putting it all in one place and then managing it myself. I am reaching the stage now where I'm thinking maybe I need to have a look at the funds I've got and have I got too many? And maybe that's a different conversation we can have. And then I've got the workplace one, which is perhaps not performing as well as I would like, or could maybe, is the way I think.
That's always with the workplace one, and that's always been I guess, and I've had people who work in the pension industry explain this to me. When you have the workplace pension fund products, they are more limiting with the investments that they offer you, and it becomes a bit of a lucky dip depending on who your employer is. Because I remember I used to have my old company, the pension company that we had our workplace pot through. The selection of funds was not good, not good. The one we've got now, you're still quite limited to, but because it's a bigger company, they have more in-house passive funds and that kind of stuff. Which is just okay, fine, I'm just going to do that. I'm not bothered with anything else. So that's what I like in my SIP. I get lots of choice. But I have had people explain this to me before, is that me, Edmund, I'm an unusual pension consumer because I shop around inside my pension for what's in there. Most people don't do that. Most people don't benefit from the extra choice, basically. So you get a limited choice, and you can make decisions within that will, the difference between an ethical or just a general type thing, or one with a bit higher bond percentage and that kind of stuff. So I think it's kind of fair enough.
Same. Well, the reason I mentioned it earlier about what do you know where they are? I think it sounds like you do, and you're putting them to work in the right kind of way. Like I said, I need to make workplace one work a little bit harder, but more or less, I think they're in the right sort of ballpark. I was talking to somebody recently about they had several sort of temporary jobs in their 20s, but I think the rules had changed, so there were pensions set up because of the way that their employment. And I think their estimate was they had about 4 or 5 pensions, and they didn't know where they all were, which I thought was just mind-blowing to me. The control freak in me and the PF watcher in me was personal finance watcher in me was how can you just let this be out there somewhere? And so I found out that there's this thing, National Pension Tracing Day, that's coming up.
Okay.
It's run by an advisor firm called Foster De Novo. And apparently there's £9,500 that 1 in 20 people have unwittingly misplaced or forgotten about in their pension pot. And that to me seems like an astronomical figure in my context. There's no way I would want to have nearly 10 grand out there somewhere not working hard enough towards a total where I could buy 3 years of a cruise if I wanted to, and it's set around the world forever. And I think, apparently there are 2.8 million lost pension pots, each with an average pot size of 9,500, and that's just shy of 27 billion quid's worth of pension savings waiting to be claimed. So on the 27th of October, Foster De Novo have got this National Pension Tracing Day. It's when the clocks go back, and apparently they suggest that you use the extra hour to see if you can find out where those pensions are. And that, to me, seems like a good use of time, if you have it, to find an hour to do it. Because if you do want to go and you want to sail around the world with 75k, £9,500 will go quite a long way to that. Particularly if you started investing it 30 years out from there, you might get closer towards that total. So. And
the risk with that as well is that money's languishing somewhere, even if it is invested and it's notionally growing, you're not watching it and it might not be. And I think it's just that kind of untended thing where even if you're not actively fiddling with it all the time, it's good to keep an eye on it. I think there's also that rule, isn't there, about pension pots and things like that. They've changed it a little while ago now, and bank accounts and stuff that sit for 15 years untouched, the government can come take it away.
That's the other thing as well.
So it becomes use it or lose it if you really forget about it over a long period of time. I'll put a link in the notes to that.
Even if you're not sure, it's worth checking. Because there's a significant amount of cash that you could have there that could, if you're far enough out from retirement as well, could sort of we talked about compound interest on the last one with regard to junior ISAs. Like, you could benefit from that too as well. So again, not financial advice, but checking whether you've got any cash in a pot somewhere doing something or not working hard enough. Seems just like common sense. Like, try and do it, just to make sure, even if you're not 100% certain, because it could be quite a hefty sum.
Yeah. Right, the last one topic we were going to talk about today, and this is actually another personal one for me, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I can't remember now. But we did, because I told you about how I'd gotten into debt with my energy provider and my water provider, and that happened.
Speaking of hefty sums,
right. That happened after my son Cosmo was born, and I think our usage of like water and energy went up for various reasons to do with looking after him. We hadn't anticipated, we didn't update our direct debit, so we started accruing a bit of debt on the bill, and that, it's not unusual for that to happen. Anyway, about the same time, this is about 3-4 months ago now, both energy company and water company got in touch and said, we're increasing your direct debit because you're in arrears, basically. So, okay. So I paid off the water one because it wasn't that much. It was like a couple $100 quid. I was just like, just get rid of it. I don't want my monthly bills going up. The energy provider, though, I decided to be a little bit more, and it was British Gas. I'm going to name them now. British Gas. I decided to try and be a little bit more canny with them about it, because they tried to increase our direct debit above £200 a month, and we were paying at the time like 130-ish or something. So it was going to be a big increase for us. I have actually written about this on my Money, now I remember. And I agreed with them in the end that we'd increase our bill to 166 or 65, something like that. And then I calculated that if we paid that based on our actual energy usage that we were getting, it would pay off the debt over the course of about 12 months. And they were like, and I spoke to the person on the phone, they're perfectly nice about it, fine. And I thought that was settled. And then this is what's happened now. Every single month since I came to that agreement with British Gas, I've had an email from them telling them we're increasing your direct debit above £200.
Right.
Because you're in debt.
Wow.
And actually what happened was we were in over £500, and because our energy usage was so good and so low, we actually paid off more than £200 just by doing what I'd done, to set up the new payment with them. But they kept chasing me to increase the payments. Anyway, this all came to a head last week, and I saw enough's enough. And I called them up and said, why are you doing this? And said, well, basically what's happened is we have no idea how much energy you're going to use, and they don't know that our energy, we've curtailed our energy use. So we're much more careful with it now because of what happened, and we were using, it was silly stuff. Like we were using like a steam sterilizer for Cosmo's baby bottles. And that is like boiling a kettle like 5 times a day. And it's adding a lot to our bills. We don't use that anymore. We've stopped using it. But they can only go off what they anticipate you're going to use based on your past usage. They were anticipating constantly that our energy usage was going to go flying up. And I said to them, well, it's not. I said, but you're going to keep doing this, aren't you? You're going to keep increasing it, and you're going to keep coming after me for the money, even though we're not doing it. And anyway, the long and short of it was I got so fed up that I paid the debt, despite the fact that I probably actually need that cash for something else, which I won't go into. And I paid the debt so I could leave, so I could switch. And it was like, see you later, British Gas. And we've now switched to Octopus. And Octopus is great. It has an app. It tells you the date. And this is not paid for by Octopus. It has the daily usage, so you can actually, because we've got a smart meter, so you can track what you're using every day. We also fixed our bills, because obviously price caps going up, and the recommendation at the moment actually is fixing can actually be quite good.
That's a big thing, isn't it? Whether you fix, is it float? I don't know what the right terminology is. I had this conversation in my house as well about what the right thing to do there is, and we decided to fix them. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah,
it was more an instinct than knowledge, but there we go.
Yeah, I think fixing is actually a good idea at the moment, because unlike when we had the energy crisis and nobody was offering fixes because of the uncertainty of what was going on, companies do have their position like better now, so they are offering fixes out there that are below the price cap. What that means, though, is if the price cap then comes down in 6 months' time, you're not going to see that benefit because you're on a fixed price.
I'm kind of all right with knowing what it will be. I need that planning at this moment. So
that's 100%. We're on the same page here, because I almost feel like it's because we both got small children. the fact that I don't have a bill shooting up
Yeah.
is a big plus at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And having that certainty is actually huge for us as a family with our outgoings. Knowing exactly how much goes out each month, you can handle that. I don't want this bill to keep shooting up, and that's why I did the switch thing. Where I paid it off, and it was like, see you later, because I can't live in a situation where I'm constantly having to think, okay, maybe I've got to start spending this extra month.
How easy was the switch? Like,
Really, really, really.
So
easy.
what did you do? Like, briefly?
So I went on the Octopus website, put my details in, and then that's it.
So they took care of it with British Gas.
They take care of the whole thing. There's an energy switch guarantee. You do get a final bill from your old energy provider, which will generally account for that period in between when you leave and when you say you're leaving, when you actually leave.
Yeah.
But it couldn't have been simpler. I mean, honestly, you barely even have to do anything.
Oh, okay. That's good.
And they've even switched over the smart meter usage, because, as I say, on the Octopus, we're now getting the daily readings for how much energy we're using, and I'm actually able to look at how much we're using each day and that kind of thing. So it is really good. And I've started doing things like paying attention to my smart meter and seeing when different appliances. It's terrible. It's become so nerdy. I'm so nerdy about it.
You're like one of those dads. It's like Blackpool illuminations in here, turning everything off.
Turn the lights off. Well, lights only account for about 5% of your energy usage.
Go on, what's in this? Oh, I need to know
the big ones.
Don't say kettle. Don't say kettle. Don't say kettle.
It's not kettle.
Good, thank God.
It's washing machine.
Yeah.
Tumble dryer, dishwasher, fridge. It's your kitchen appliances.
You expect that, wouldn't you?
Fridge, you can't do anything about. I did see a tip that if you increase your fridge temperature to 5 degrees, so we had to take off. Bizarrely, our fridge temperature was set at 2 degrees. We've increased it to 5. That should save a bit of energy.
Right. Okay. Why is that? Just not making it as cold.
That's it doesn't have to make it as cold. It uses slightly less energy.
But everything still is cold enough.
If food's cold enough, it's not going to go bad at 5 degrees compared to 2 degrees.
Right, okay.
Basically, not enough to make it.
There's a good tip for you listeners.
Yeah. News you can use. Other stuff, we put we got a smart thermostat. This has been the most exciting thing that's happened to me in a while, because I spent 80 quid on a smart thermostat and could not get anybody in North Devon to come and fit it for me, because apparently this job was too small for every plumber in North Devon. So I gambled.
You did it yourself?
I watched a YouTube video.
Oh, my word.
I installed a smart thermostat.
Credit where it's due. I'm going to give you a clap for that. I would not dream of that. Wow.
I wired a smart thermostat into a boiler. Absolutely terrible.
Did you wire it properly? Or?
Well, I assume
we'll
so.
see.
It hasn't exploded yet.
Okay.
If my home insurer is listening, it was fitted by an expert.
Yeah.
That expert being me.
Yeah. I've watched the YouTube clip. That makes me an expert.
Exactly.
Links to the YouTube clip in the show notes as well. There you go. Yeah, come on. For anyone else who's intrepid like that.
I will say, I do not recommend trying it at home. I had to dig out the boiler manual.
God.
And look at the wiring and literally watch this YouTube video forensically. I think you can do it, but I think you need to know what you're doing a little bit.
I think what's going through my head now is tip your plumber. Yeah. That's what's going on.
Tip your plumber.
Jobs that I can't do. Tip my plumber.
That guy earns more than me. Those plumbers.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the wrong game, clearly. Well, you are.
We're definitely in the wrong game. We should be a plumber. It's not the first bit of plumbing I've done this year. I fitted a tap in our kitchen.
Oh, my God.
Replaced the tap, like a nice tap.
Eddie, you starting a plumbing business? Is this it? Is this your coming out to the world saying, I'm now a plumber and a journalist?
Yeah. Well, tune in for more DIY tips from Ed, basically. So and I've been getting a lot of favourable compliments from my in-laws for these kind of for doing these kind of jobs. I'm worried I'm going to start getting roped into stuff.
Yeah, you will do on a Saturday. Can you just come over and my brother-in-law does that actually for us, because I'm rubbish at all this stuff. Can you just have a look at this and just have a look at that? So,
the thing that
shout out James.
Thing that's really for me is obviously we don't have the money to pay people to come do it for us. We're not well off.
And the price of those jobs is spiked quite significantly. Yeah.
And when you're a renter, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff, right? I mean, obviously being a renter is not an ideal situation, but when you own a home, you have to pay for everything in that house to make sure it doesn't fall apart. Mm-hmm. And actually, as cheap as you just learn how to do some of it. Mm. The tap thing, it was not that hard. Mm. You just have to know how to turn the water supply off while you do it.
Yeah, stop clocks and all that. I'm joking. Yeah. I'm not completely useless in that regard.
The thermostat was bordering on next level. If I had started meddling with the gas, then obviously that's not okay.
No.
Get a gas safe engineer to do that.
100%. Yeah.
But I did it.
Amazing. Fun. So we're going to see how the Octo thing goes, is it? Octopus, sorry.
Octopus.
Octopus thing goes.
Yeah.
I think that's Tanya takes care of the energy stuff.
Oh, really?
So we have division of labour in the house. So I'm doing a lot of the financial services you'd expect and bills, and she looks at that and decided to make the switch and the fix, which I think is a good shout. So I'll find out who our supplier is through her, and see whether we're on the same one. I think it probably was, but there was a lot of good publicity about them prior to the big energy price spike before, because I think there was a rush to kind of sign up with them as well. So, and obviously their advertising campaign on radio stuff about good customer service seems to be working well as well. So
it's one of those interesting companies. They do a lot of different things. I do actually have a friend who works for them, and he actually gave me a referral code. So we got £50 credit each for being referred to the energy provider. So yeah, that's nice.
That's going to help when the bills continue to go as they are.
So. I will add again that we are not being paid by Octopus.
No, we're not. In fact, we spent a lot of time talking about them, but it's because Ed's had a fantastic experience. So there we go. Credit where it's due on the Mad Money podcast. Yeah.
Right, I'm gonna bring things to an end there. Chris, thanks again. It's been a different experience.
It's a bit strange, a bit strange seeing you in the flesh, but pleasant. Or as always,
everybody's enjoyed watching or listening. Obviously, you can catch us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, or X, it's now called, I guess, TikTok, Instagram, and then, of course, everything else on the Mouthy Money website, and subscribe to the newsletter, too, to get the weekly updates from us direct to your inbox. So with that, thanks, everybody, and goodbye.